Hi everyone, I'm Asha, an Akashic Records reader, blogger, and podcaster. In this series, we will demystify the Akashic Records by bringing to you bite-sized contents on frequently asked questions relating to the Akashic Records. We will also explore topics relating to spirituality, as well as practical application, learnings, and reflections in the Akashic Records. My Akashic Masters are very excited to join us in this journey. We send much love, light, and blessings to all. Welcome to episode 90 of Case Study 27 of an Akashic Light reading and healing session with Aila. This is the second session with Aila. At the start, we asked the Akashic Masters if they had any general messages for Aila. We welcome you to this Akashic Records session once again. We invite you to have an open heart and mind to receive the messages meant for you for this session through our channel. Take some time to reflect on the messages, what resonates with you deeply, and see what actions you can take for yourself to improve your life. On the first query, Aila asked, "What is the lesson that I need to learn from my relationship with my parents? They are pretty distant and not particularly warm. My mother is an extremely negative person, which makes it very difficult to want to be closer to her. The lesson I'm sensing is the forgiveness of the past trauma and hurt that happened in childhood days, which you may remember or not, that is lodged in the subconscious memory. And they are saying that it forms a veil over our eyes, allowing us to see them in a limited perspective. Sometimes we may want to paint the person as objectively bad, but subjectively and inherently, the notion of bad is subject to dispute. Why? Because it is from everyone's perspectives. So for example, if we are able to see people around us generally with loving and compassionate perspectives, then even if the person may have inherently bad qualities within them, we are able to take that into context, into the broader personality, broader circumstances that they grew up and lived in, and just see everything in context like a neutral observer. On any past life contract between Aila and her mother, interestingly, they showed an image of an old lady with bun-up hair at the back and wearing traditional costume. So they're trying to depict that personality as suggesting someone with very conservative value systems, who sees things in a right and wrong way. And that is because of her own upbringing herself. So her upbringing led her to form her limited perspectives, which she then thought she needs to impose it down on others, and therefore results in this conflicting dynamic that you have with her. A parent-child relationship is a very sacred bond that a soul chose at birth. So it is not something that the parties frivolously ended up with without a choice. But it was more that the higher souls of you and your mother consciously chose that you will come into her womb to be reborn as her daughter, and that sacred union you have is something that is linked very deeply in your blood connection with her. Energetically, they see the blood of both of you flowing as one. And you both share this soul heritage and family together, not just in this lifetime, but in intricate lifetimes together as multiple souls across dimensions. Difficult as it may be, give yourself the permission to step back, to see the broader context and purpose of this relationship. The first step, difficult as it may be, forgiveness of the past trauma and hurt that might have been inflicted on her part is a good starting point. And then, to take time to reflect on these words that were shared, that the soul consciously chose this relationship at birth. And this is something that you and her are intricately tied together for lifetimes. That her higher self allowed you this birth in her womb to come out to experience lessons as a soul. And your soul graciously allowed her to be your mother, to have a chance to air these limited perspectives, and over time, to maybe even undergo some rewiring of her own perspectives, just by her own observation of herself through her age and experiences. It might be a slow and long-drawn process, but it is for no one to judge except her, because it is her own journey. Aila shared that she doesn't particularly remember any past trauma and hurt, although the trauma and hurt is practically like 20 times a day every single day. Is it important for her to identify exactly this past trauma and hurt? That feeling is important. You might have various experiences. Try to trace to, as far as you can recall, the first experience where you developed this unsettling feeling, this conflicting feeling with your mother. It could start from various small incidents. There's no need for perfection. There's no need to conclude that this is the one and only incident. It could be an accumulation of seemingly small and trivial incidents. But they all matter because back then, when we were growing up, our heart chakra has not been fully developed. So between the years of 1 to 7, in particular, our chakras were still growing, and our heart chakra back then was still developing, not fully developed. And it was during that time, when things were sent across to us, we might feel under attack. It can be, say, a rejection, a frown, an accusatory tone, or words over seemingly small actions. These are the inner work that we need to focus on. It might seem frivolous, but back then to you as a child, it is everything. And sometimes the trauma can be so deep that as we grow up, we don't even want to face it because we thought that we have gone past that era. We don't have to face these experiences again. We can just go forward, move on with life, embark on new beginnings and new phases of life. Well, that's true to a certain extent. But subconsciously, our soul, our inner children, still latch on to little bits of these memories and experiences. And they flare up from time to time. For example, in arguments and confrontations we may have. But we don't really understand that these triggers were all rooted or started from these seemingly trivial incidents. And this leads to the message of mastery of self. It is through all this inner work, journaling, inner reflections, that we truly be a master of our own inner awareness. That means we fully grasp that this feeling that I have, I can trace to this quality, this incident, and therefore have this link on things. It is like a logical link to things, a cause and effect. And over time, as we dig through all these things, we start clearing up the baggage within us. While flipping through the baggage, it might seem disastrous, or sometimes we might not be able to recollect because it is so much and so long ago, and nobody has been sorting through them. It has been long forgotten. But as we sort through them, we gain that mastery of self. We gain that memory. We gain those soul parts that we lost while we were traumatized back then. And these are important because all these parts, when they come and merge back to us, they are all a part of us. They help us to feel more whole and complete. And they help to complete the missing jigsaw puzzles that we have within ourselves, in our emotional body. Aila asked if it would help for our healing session later that she shares the 2 traumatic incidents that she remembers so that we can direct the healing. Up to you if you want to share. Or later, you hold that intention and we send healing to those incidents that you hold on to, and we cut the cords. Aila shared on both incidents when she was really young. For the first incident, she woke up panicking as she was all alone in the house, as her mother had gone to pick her sister up. For the second incident, Aila's mother was late in picking her up at the kindergarten, which left Aila panicking as she was all alone. So for both incidents, it was the same. Aila was all alone and she didn't know what to do. The masters are saying the soul felt helpless back then because as a child, it felt everything. And that abandonment was something unacceptable that also forms a grudge against her. Because deep within, we hold the expectation that our parents will be there for us, will take care of us, will journey life with us. But right from the start, at a tender age, when our heart chakra is still developing, where we are still growing the awareness about world and dynamics with people around us, little incidents like these might seem nothing in adults' eyes, but it is everything to a child's eyes. We don't need to objectively label whether this is harmful enough, sufficient or not. It matters. It is part of your soul's memory, your soul's trauma, and it deserves to be released. So we will work on that for the healing segment later. Is there anything you can do to improve the relationship at this stage? So first, for the healing, we can do that cutting of cords. It will create some space and mental clarity. Because sometimes we are too corded with the past event. It is very suffocating and we don't realize that. Second, journaling will help. Why? Because sometimes, even after the clearing, there are still remnants of energy or feelings that we hold within us that we just need to air it out or process. Our mind just wants to indulge in this process of going through it. Even if it may be seemingly trivial or frivolous, allow ourselves to go through that. Self-care during this period is crucial. Self-care in terms of how you take care and love yourself each day. Because when these traumatic incidents come up for resolution, especially these kind of inner child wounds, it is very important that we as adults learn to nourish and take care of ourselves as we undergo this healing process. So there might be this healing crisis that comes up. When we are facing the emotions, we are in the heat of feeling that intensity of the emotions and the pain and helplessness coming back again. It might sometimes seem difficult for us to hold proper conversations with the mother or with somebody else. Give ourselves that permission and space to just love ourselves, heal ourselves, and be with ourselves. So being our own greatest supporter during this period, seeing ourselves through this healing process will be very nourishing for you. On the second query, Aila asked, "For my dad, he is distant. He's not so negative, but he doesn't communicate much. And I always felt like he valued his money more than me." For your father, his attachment to money arises from the conservative family values that he holds, and it is something that he has taken on from the family line. This attachment to money, because money is everything. In the past generations, where deep within their DNA or even their way of life, money is the means to success, to happiness, to everything in life. He tends to prioritize the money because he believes that as a means to a positive end that he envisages for himself and his family. They're also saying that he tends to just be a man of very few words. So what exactly is your dad's purpose to you, and vice versa? Interestingly, one of his purposes in life is to be a provider for your family, to kind of lift everybody out from that possibility of poverty. And even I'm sensing something like poverty consciousness. That might be one of his higher purposes that his higher soul is striving to get him out of, to step out of the poverty consciousness mindset. So we may not technically be poor under objective measure, but somewhere deep within us, we may either don't feel the worth or feel that we may be lacking. Even if there's a lot of money coming in, we feel that we are lacking in money in some sense. So his higher purpose to himself is to try to stride out of that poverty consciousness within him, to liberate himself from this trapped mindset that he has taken on from the family line. And in the sense, you can facilitate in this process just by being the way you are towards him, with respect wherever possible, and with acceptance of his current predicament, current mindset, and set values towards money. We are not saying that agree or disagree with his lifestyle, his mindset. We are just saying that accept him for who he is. That is your role. When you accept him for who he is, You give him the space, the energy of respect and acceptance, and then he will flourish at his own divine timing. He might come to a realization later in life that why is he struggling so hard with money? Does it really bring him happiness? Is that really the means to an end? Is that everything in his life that matters? That will slowly come to his own realizations over time. But your role in this relationship is just to accept him for who he is. Respect him as your father, the provider of the family all these years. You can consider exploring karma healing of your family line. It is something that you can do for your own family. Allow the body to experience and allow events to show and present themselves to you, including the changes, the aftermath, weeks and even a few months after a karma healing session. So a comprehensive karma healing session for you for two things. 1. Inner child will be something very helpful because it will be a deep purging, not just in present life whatever childhood wounds, but also whatever past cords that you might have taken on that is attached to you. 2. Your family line. You have a duty and responsibility, especially when you have more resources and awareness on your hands, to be able to do this karma clearing for family line for both sides, father side and mother side, as a way of rewarding and blessing the family line for giving your soul this chance to be reborn in this line, to experience life on earth. That gift of birth is the most sacred gift that you have been given in this lifetime. So to repay them, you can consider doing something like a karma healing meditation in inner child and also in the family line. Aila is open to karma healing, especially if it doesn't require a lot of effort on her part. Is it something that she has to keep doing? To which her master shared that karma healing is pretty intensive on the emotional and mental bodies. So it can be like a 1-hour session, but it is the follow-up from the karma healing that is the intensive part. Because memories may start coming up. You will notice more conflicts for a while. Flare-ups will happen. Why? Because the souls are given an opportunity to re-examine and rebalance the relationship. So for example, you do family healing for father's line, then the bottled-up suppressed feelings come up as conflict to be resolved. Both sides want to air it out. We might go from one extreme end to another extreme end for a couple of days or weeks, and after that, it settles down. Allow the soul to be a neutral observer, to see all these things unfolding from a higher perspective, that my soul is given a chance to rebalance this relationship with my dad. Suddenly, this conflict is creating itself for us to talk things through, for us to try to have open, heart-to-heart conversations, which seemed impossible for a few years. Now, it is an opportunity. I'm going to latch on that. I'm going to air it out. So these are opportunities that the soul is given. So it might seem emotionally and mentally exhausting. Therefore, karma healing is something they suggest to take it slow and steady. So for example, you work on father's family line for a month. Only then you move on to mother's line. Then when you feel ready, you work on inner child. So usually people don't work on a few things. Otherwise, there will be too much chaos in life. Aila wanted to know why is her dad such an angry person. Like at work, he's pretty unprofessional. He shouts at his staff or colleagues. It's pretty unacceptable in a HR way. What I'm sensing is that it comes mainly from a wounded child within him. The part of that child that feels neglected, that was wounded and traumatized. And maybe that arose from his own childhood days with his parents. However that dynamics unfolded. Our current situation, emotions, thoughts and beliefs are intricately linked and bound to our own childhood experiences. So even in the dad's case, it is similar, and it is something that needs resolution. That means he also needs to air it out, be given an opportunity to go through those experiences to release. Otherwise, he becomes an example of a walking baggage of wounds and trauma within him, flaring up at the slightest opportunity. In summary, he is like an adult version of his own wounded child. So that is where that anger stems from, and that is where it is calling out for healing. But in our parents' era, they may not be given that resources, or they may not necessarily have that awareness, bandwidth, space or mental clarity at the moment to just process all this and even attribute to their childhood and even consider journaling. That is something really exert to them, so it is very difficult. But on our part, on the soul's part, because of the soul network that you intricately have with him, that acceptance that you have for him for just who he is, no judgment, just accepting, respecting, and then being the best version of yourself will then inspire him. So for example, as you do your inner work diligently and become an improved version of yourself slowly and gradually over time, which you have already been improving over the years, he will sense it within him. And that will be an indirect inspiration for him to look inwards. That will definitely take more time. It is also not for us to judge. It is his so-called divine timing, and we just leave it for his soul to internalize that process. Aila shared that she's in no position to correct her parents. It is their own problem. But you are in the position to control your emotions, in the sense that you steer the ownership of your own emotions towards them. That is your power, because it is a soul network. As you work on yourself, that subtle vibration and energy in your energy fields will then project outwards to them, slowly and gradually. And sometimes, with the least expectations, it just happened. And you get a shock out of your life. That how will they even have the bandwidth to say something like that or react in a certain way? But that's just how things happen when we least expect it. Aila asked if there are any other messages about her parents. In general, be patient with them. Accept them for who they are. And rather than to be reactive over them, just take that time, resources and space to focus on your own inner work and your own inner reflections, because it is through healing ourselves that we can truly be of service to others and indirectly to radiate the light of inspiration to them and quicken healing. On the third query, Aila asked, I generally have a difficulty being punctual. I know a lot of it is because I'm in a rush, and I choose to have a rushed life. My guides already told me to slow down. Is there some other message? They say less is more. That is the mindset that you try to seek in your consciousness. Remind ourselves. It is something that might need some validation and reflection to test it out, to kind of affirm to ourselves. Is it true? Does it make sense? So we have to satisfy our logical mind that, does it really make sense? What does it mean by less is more? When we focus on one thing at a time, it is what our mind has been grown or programmed to do. That means our mind since ancient times is not meant to multitask. It is meant to focus on one thing at a time, get it out of the way, and then move on to the next task. That is how we were originally programmed as humans to operate. But in this business of time and age, when resources are limited and people are pretty stretched in the workplace and life in general, we tend to feel this rush. Because we feel that to a certain extent, there's limited time for us to play with. We feel that we have limited pockets of time to do a huge list of things. And that is why we constantly have this time pressure within us to perform the work to expectations and also to get things out. So sometimes in the haze of things, we might be under the impression that it might be faster if we jump from one task to another. Or as we work on this, we worry over whether item 2 can be completed. Or suddenly we have an idea of what to do for item 3. And then our mind becomes all over the place. Energetically, what happens is that the mind becomes very fragmented. So we see ourselves as a physical body and also our energy bodies around us. And we have all these. They're showing me like telephone wires pointing out from us. For example, if we have a thought about the past, it will look to the past. If we have a thought about the future, it will look towards the future. And we have all these cords extended all around us. It is important for us to clean up our daily energy fields so that we don't end up with all this energy projected outwards at everyone. As we move through life, sometimes we might feel and become very corded to everyone and every work that we do. And we find it very hard to extract ourselves from this situation. Energetically, when we feel that we are very stuck with a situation or person, we are actually corded to them. We need to cut off all these cords, call back our soul parts and fragments to us. The Master suggests in your case to take the time to internalize what it means personally for you. Less is more. As we focus on less things, we end up doing and completing more work. How will that happen? When will that happen? Exactly what steps does it show or materialize in reality? That is something for your soul to reflect on. because it is very customized to your case. And your soul has that intelligence and ability to be a neutral observer. We are not saying that we can get it 100% right. But as we go through life, have it hanging in your mind, in your consciousness. As we get bombarded with a lot of things, and at the end of the day, we feel what just happened. All parts everywhere. And then I feel that I did a lot, but I didn't accomplish much. Go back to that book, that journaling, and then just reflect on how that day could have unfolded differently. Could I have exercised better or other choices in terms of how I extended myself to others, how I work, or just my working style in general, or maybe my way of life in general? That is something for your soul to experiment as well. What does less is more mean like for me? How can I test it out? And does it really work for me at a personal level? Aila shared that while less is more sounds great, how do we achieve it in reality? They say it is customized for your case. It is something that will seep into your consciousness gradually. So what we are sharing here, we are not expecting or assuming that it's going to be so easy. After this session, you're going to get out of this session and feel less is more, and that's all done. That is not as simple in reality, because we are very bombarded in our consciousness with all kinds of things and realities in our life, all the pressures and stresses. They acknowledge that, but just let it sit within you, because what they are seeing in you is that now you have that ability and potential which you are slowly growing to be that neutral observer. So you're trying to watch your own mind through that journaling that you have started. As you familiarize yourself with being that neutral observer, extricating yourself from all these situations, or even just going through them, kind of having a bad day and suffering from it, and then just going back again to your neutral observer when you finally have that mental space and bandwidth to do so. Just to think about it yourself. How could I have exercised better choices? That is something that will give your soul a lot of wisdom. Because sometimes we tend to think of wisdom in a certain sense, like IQ. But these are things that have long-lasting positive impact on the soul. Can you imagine when you have fully internalized and are convinced that less is more? How it is going to drastically change your outlook of life and the way you present yourself to others and the world. It will basically revamp you to another style altogether once you become convinced yourself. And that will take time through life's experiences. On the last query, any final messages? Be patient, kind and gentle with your soul as it undergoes this turbulent period of self-reflection. In this initial phase, in this uncomfortable, unfamiliar territory that you've landed yourself into. And know that better opportunities, better pathways lie ahead of you as you undergo this self-examination and transform yourself indirectly in this process. So in your case, it is like a metamorphosis, going from caterpillar to butterfly. It will take time, but it will be a very beautiful journey, so long as you stay committed to it. So blessings to you, Aila. Next, we focus on the healing segment for this session. Aila wanted the healing to focus on releasing her 2 traumatic incidents with her mother, as well as 2 other traumatic experiences with her father, where he valued money over her health. We called in Aila's Akashic Masters, Archangels, Angels, Higher Self, and lots of karma to surround her, breathing in the light of the Akashic Records to nourish all cells of her body, her chakras, and energy fields. With each breath out, releasing other people's energies, expectations, dense and discordant energies lodged within her. We invited Aila to hold her intention on the 2 traumatic incidents with her mother in her mind. We called upon Aila's lots of karma to cut away and release all cords connecting her to these 2 traumatic incidents, and to do a thorough cleansing as much as possible. We also called back Aila's personal power, energy, soul parts and fragments related to these 2 traumatic incidents that she might have left behind or taken away from her or stuck in time and space. We also cut away and released all remnants of memories, thoughts, emotions, and feelings related to these 2 traumatic incidents that were not aligned to her highest good to keep. We repeated the same process with Aila to release the 2 traumatic experiences with her father. We called in the violet flame to run through Aila's energy bodies and chakras 7 times, to transmute all dense or discordant energies, emotions, and thoughts, and to burn away all remnants of cords cut away and left in her energy fields. We invited the gold light of the Akashic Records to flow into Aila's chakras and energy fields, to patch all holes, rips, and tears in her energy fields. Her team sent blessings her way. They cheered her on and reminded her that they too are her greatest supporters, as she is with herself. With love and blessings, Asha and Akashic Masters. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast. If you would like to read about my dialogues and reflections with the Akashic Masters, you can visit my free blog at Asha-AkashicRecords.com. Till next time, take care.